So I was saying migration is part of human living. It can be located wherever human beings are in society. And people migrate for various reasons, but particularly in Africa, we want to highlight the fact that migration has always happened where there is conflict. So people would opt to go elsewhere to escape the conflict. Sometimes it is to escape natural disasters such as heavy rains or droughts. So there are a lot of reasons that make people migrate. And in Africa, we have lived with migration across countries. And these countries, by the way, yes, we respect the international borders, but you will always find there are human societies that share common values across borders. So it is not anything new to Africa. It has always lived with us in Africa.
When we take a look at the grant that Italy gave to the country of Tunisia, also keeping in mind what Kais Said said about immigrants that were in the country, some of whom had to flee that country and seek refuge elsewhere, in particular where migration or immigrants are concerned, in an effort to stave them off from getting to Italy. How should we understand the European discourse around migration?
So it's always funny that when there is discourse on migration, there always has to be a differentiation between what I call the zone of being and the zone of non-being. The zone of being meaning it's a place where human rights are upheld. So if it's in Europe, migration is understood as a necessity. For example, when the war in Ukraine broke out, many Ukrainians that are European, they had to be evacuated and go elsewhere in Europe. There was never so much scrutiny that they were subjected to as Africans are subjected when they get to European countries. So the zone of being has to do with human rights. It has to do with the recognition of the ontological density of the human. It is unfortunately not extended to Africans or other people from the global south. So migration, when it happens to anyone in the global south, it is almost dismissed as an entity, and it is almost dismissed as something that should not be happening, yet it is necessary. So the zone of non-being, human rights are never upheld, and we are seen as a nuisance, especially when it's people from Africa or from other global south places when we go to Europe, unfortunately.
You speak of the zone of being, and in light of this tragedy, but the tragedy also this week with 5 explorers who were wanting to see the Titanic lost their lives, we've seen a lot of criticism in terms of which lives matter, or rather, which lives are given priority. What have you made of that?
So exactly this is where the issue is. So the Euro-North American-centric narrative places ontological being on people that have met their tragedy in America. So these 5 explorers, billionaires for that matter, they decide to go and explore the Titanic, the wreckage of the Titanic, and they lose their lives, presumably. And now the world has to bow down and we imbibe that narrative. Yet on the 14th of June, more than 700 people were faced with the same tragedy when their boat capsized. And now it's believed more than 350 people have died. They have lost their lives. And there is no global about this issue. There is no hype about this issue. And yet we have to be seeing only these 5 people who hail from the Americas. Of course, they are of different nationalities, but because they are located in the zone of being, one has to give attention to that. And again, it really tells of the deception of the Euro-North American-centric narrative. Because if you look at the information that has been peddled, particularly by outlets of information located in the zone of being, in the Americas, as in the USA, in the UK, and in France, they are all hyping the very issue of the 5 that lost their lives in the submersible, and there is nothing that is being said about the more than 350 people who have lost their lives in the coast of Greece.
Doc, if you don't mind me asking, were you at all curious about the developments of this week around that submersible?
Yes, I am curious, and I do not necessarily have evidence. If these people were not sacrificed, they were made to escape, and they are escaping something more sinister that is yet to be revealed. I do not think it's an accident at all.
Dr. Chidochashe Nyere, could it be also, when we take a look at the issue, you highlighted the disparities in the coverage, is there a sense of migration fatigue, if you will, for lack of a better phrase?
I do not think there is an issue of migration fatigue necessarily. If you look at European countries, or if you look at the Western world right now, especially post-COVID-19 pandemic, many of these countries are actually welcoming migrants from Africa and other places which they call overseas. So if you look at America, you look at Canada, you look at New Zealand, you look at the UK itself, it is extending its shores, and it's welcoming people from Africa, from other places, precisely because there is labor shortage. So I do not think there is migration fatigue. If anything, this migration should really be hailed as people presenting themselves to these shores. But of course, there are always issues of immigration laws. So the processes of getting there, it's something that can be discussed differently. But it clearly indicates that there is nothing, this has nothing to do with migration fatigue, except for what I would term explicit racism.
Dr. Chidochashe Nyere, postdoctoral research fellow at the University of Johannesburg. Thank you.